Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show, brought to you in association with Levi Solicitors. You're not Michael Normanton. That's Rob Conlon.
Will's probate conveyancing.
You're actually better at it than him.
I just feel imbued by his spirit sat here.
It's because you're sat in the chair.
Yeah, I feel more miserable as well.
How long, though, can you banter those three words for, do you think, realistically? Years? Months?
When it comes to flogging
Weeks,
a joke
not
to
months?
death, when it comes to flogging a joke to death, this is the home for that.
I was going to say, if it's lasted this long.
Yeah. It's 15% off on those, what we call the big three, Will's Probate Conveyancing with Levi Solicitors. 10% discount on your legal fees on everything else. levisolicitors.co.uk/. It's not Phil Hay, it's your Phil Hay. It is Monday Club. It's confusing because it's not Monday. We are getting that changed. I do keep asking. But everything takes time, doesn't it? Like Leeds United's performance in the transfer market, hey?
Boom. It makes me wonder if anybody actually phones up Levi's with the right code. They listen to this and they go, what are we supposed to say? They phone up good, Phil Hay. Like, no.
Yeah, they got legal services for you, for your business, and you can get the discount, 15% Will's Probate Conveyancing. It's Monday Club when you contact Levi's. Yeah, into business, down to business. And last time we spoke, Phil, we were a bit pressed for time at the start of the week, so we can expand on some of the stuff that's happened. Ampadu is now confirmed. It wasn't quite confirmed when we spoke last, but he's in the door, number one.
It was suddenly a really busy 24, 48 hours Monday and Tuesday between Ampadu and Greta Steinson coming in as technical director and the takeover finally getting there as well, which had to happen. But yes, Ampadu becomes signing number one. They've done him on 4-year contract with the option of a fifth as well. £7 million up front, which I think is pretty good value for him and decent fee by Championship standards. I think pretty achievable add-ons of about £3 million, which will in the end earn Chelsea somewhere in the region of £10 million in total if it all pays off as it's supposed to. They're actually pretty good at that, Chelsea, pretty good at making money on their fringe players. They've been doing it for a long time. But I think for Leeds, they definitely needed to get something in the door, definitely need to get something over the line. He seems like a pretty good start to me. And
7 rising to 10, good value?
I would say so, yeah. I think so for Wales International and somebody who is definitely well thought of. I think the thing for Ampadu is that he's been on the loan merry-go-round for a little while now. He's had 2 seasons in Italy. He's had Sheffield United as well. Was no longer thought of at Chelsea as this big development project as he had been 3 or 4 years ago. He did seem to get very much lost in the churn of head coaches, managers down there, but also in the spell, particularly under Mauricio Sarri, where he didn't play much, and then the move to Leipzig, which again didn't get him much in the way of game time. That seemed to shift him from being this prospect who Chelsea might develop into a major first-team player into somebody who looked like his career was going to carry on elsewhere. And I think for him, he wants somewhere where he can settle, wants somewhere where he can play longer term. And 4 years plus 1, if the 5th-year option kicks in, certainly gives him that chance.
And it doesn't hammer us for profit and sustainability either, do we? It's like £1.75 million on the books this year, which is a lot lower than some of the fees we've been paying out recently for players who are no longer even here.
Yeah, it's always the way with fees, isn't it? And this is where it all gets confusing, is that you never pay it up front, or you very rarely pay it up front. There are rare exceptions. There were a couple at Leeds last season with Phillips and Rafinha. But no, on paper, it's a lot of money to commit to a player for a championship club, or a fairly sizable amount. But it's not as if 10 million quid goes flying out the door in one hit. So no, it shouldn't affect them too much in that sense.
Come to you on this one, Rob, actually. We've not heard from you on any of our shows about Ampadu, the state of play at the minute. Are you quite happy with it? Does it make sense to you as a sign-in, the fee, the sort of level we're shopping at?
Yeah, I mean, those 24 hours at the start of the week just felt like a big relief. It was like, right, we've signed a player, the takeover's done, we've got a technical director. There was a story about Willie Nonto not having a release clause, and it just felt like, it doesn't have to be terrifying. Like, it's a start of something now that we can build on. With Ampadu, I kind of want Leeds to be signing players in that mid-20s range of 26, 27-ish, like, I think I said on a recent show, like Luke Ayling was that age when Bielsa came in, where they kind of know what it's all about. But Ampadu does have a lot of experience despite being quite young. And I almost like that he's already had setbacks and it's not all just been plain sailing for him. Like a lot of the players we signed last summer, they'd only really known success. And even players like Rocker, when he'd been at Bayern, he'd not really played much. But he still ended that with like 2 league titles and a Club World Cup I was looking at the other day. Same with Christensen. It didn't really work out for him at Ajax, but he won a league and a cup double. And you think, well, is that really preparing you for a life at Leeds United?
Well, 3 relegations.
Hopefully it's a bit better than that. We'll see how he copes with the Championship, because he has been playing in Serie A the last 2 seasons, and I don't think he's played in the Championship yet. But as a start, seems promising to me.
Part of the problem for him has been that there's been no consistent framework for what he's for his career path or what he's supposed to be doing. So every club that he's gone to, as you mentioned, have struggled in their division, and not predominantly because he's been in the team, but they've played in a different way to Chelsea, or to the way Chelsea were playing at the time when he was moving out. So no real continuity tactically or for his development. And I think if I was saying this to Michael on the previous show, I think if this was a Championship signing, you'd wonder if they were kind of doing the Victor Ortas in the sense of going for somebody who definitely at this stage is not proven at Premier League level. You couldn't suggest that he was. He's played in Serie A, he's played in the Premier League with Sheffield United, but that's not the same thing. In the Championship, I think you are actually investing in somebody who should have the credentials and should have the ability to be good in that league, which is why I feel fairly optimistic about this deal. In no way suggesting that on its own it converts Leeds into a strong team and a strong squad. They need more than Ampadu alone, but I think it's a good start.
I know we don't know how the squad's going to look by the end of the window, but as it stands at the minute, even if we retain some or the majority of what we've got at the minute, it looks like a fairly strong position to my eyes. I don't know if it's just my pre-season optimism that's kicking in.
I think there's the basis of a really strong team there. What I would question is whether or not there's enough of a squad to get you through 46 games. And as even though you do need a really strong 11, and if you look particularly at Farke's teams at Norwich, the players he leaned on, some of them were so good at delivering for him. Pukki, Buendia, Oliver Skip in midfield, who was on loan from Spurs and is back at Spurs. Somebody else who Farke, I think, would love if he could get him. But, I mean, he just seems to be quite heavily involved, Skip, and would cost a lot of money as well. But, he lent on those players and they were really good for him. But he had a squad and he had equally good or comparatively good players that he could rely on when he needed to change things around, injuries or suspensions, form, whatever else, the things that catch up with you over 46 games. And so where I think you could put together actually a really strong, dynamic 11 with Leeds, with players who other clubs would definitely take, Sinisterra, Nonto and others, it's the depth that I think they probably need to work in. They need players for the starting 11, there's no question about that. But you tell me if you think otherwise. I don't look at the 20 that they would have and think it's necessarily quite there when it comes to seeing you through a Championship season as either automatic promotion candidates or going up through the playoffs.
No, it still looks imbalanced to me. I think it's the midfield that needs most work.
I think we're going to fulfil Marcelo Bielsa's dream and just play an 11 of wingers and go up doing that.
Although Farke, and I'm going to say these words very carefully, likes to play relatively narrow, doesn't he? It's not all about making the pitch as big as possible on both sides at all times.
Well, Buendia, for example, there was a bit of the Pablo Hernandez is there in that he played on the right of a 3. With Hernandez, it was more like the right of a 4 under Bielsa. But I always used to look at Hernandez as a bit of a kind of false 7 in the sense that positionally and on paper, you would think of him as a right winger, just looking at the way that the team was drawn up. But he used to drift all over the place and he used to play centrally a lot. He was very hard to track, and because of that, he was really dangerous when it came to goals and assists. And you found the same with Buendia. He would score plenty of goals for Norwich. He would come up with assists too. So yeah, you're right. But behind the 9 with Farke, it can quite often look a little bit more like 3 10s rather than a 10 and 2 out-and-out wingers. But he will use a certain degree of width. He'll want his fullbacks to push on as much as they can as well. Rob and I were talking before we came on about the importance of whoever plays at 10, directly behind his lone centre forward. And that still feels to me like one of the positions that's going to need addressed. I think in most areas of the team, you could pick players out of the squad who could certainly do a job for you there or do a very good job. But at 10, at the moment, I'm not quite sure who you would be going for.
Do you think we can keep Sinisterra? And if we do, wouldn't that sort of position be ideal for him, cutting in from, let's say, the left? It's the same part of the pitch that Willie Nonto occupies as well. So we've actually got a bit of an embarrassment of riches there, haven't we, to an extent? Well,
I think with Sinisterra, and I noticed this under Marsh, however you try to play him and whether you want to be narrow in that line or whether you want specific width, he will end up giving you width anyway. And I think you get a bit of that from Nonto. That regardless of the fact that you're perhaps not looking for that out and out from them, and Marsh never was asking for that from them, Sinisterra could still be a threat out wide and could still play as a winger. Will he stay? I think it's possible that Leeds can keep him. I definitely think that, but it's really hard to say because it's all going to depend on who is offering what. And I do think as we get into August, that's when it will really start to knuckle down the question of, is Harrison staying, is Harrison going, is Tyler Adams sticking around, Sinisterra, Nonto, others who Leeds want to keep but are maybe wary of bids coming in for them. That's the sharp end, and that's when you really find out.
Yeah, I mean, Parag Morata, was it in the letter in the YEP, said we've got to prepare ourselves for some departures. That will happen. It's always sad seeing people go, but we're going to build a squad to be proud of.
Well, for example, there is a lot of noise, particularly in Italy, about Nonto and Everton. And Everton, nobody is denying that Everton like Nonto. There is the mixed messages on this. So at the Everton end, they're saying that there hasn't been a formal bid to Leeds. At the Leeds end, the message we're getting is that there was a formal approach from Everton and that the valuation that was out there of about £50 million was pretty accurate and was also knocked back. They do have the advantage with him that he doesn't have a release clause in his contract. So they're not actually obliged to sell. But you know how it is if you have a player who's starting to agitate. And I'm not saying that he is starting to agitate, but if that was to happen and if there was an effort on his part, on the part of his camp, to move him on and move him out of the Championship to higher division, then you suddenly have a decision to make and you have to decide, can you retain this player? Is he going to be happy enough to do what you want him to do, or do you actually have to cash in? So I think Moratti is right. I think there will be departures. I think there'll be departures that Leeds would rather avoid. But that's the life of a relegated Premier League club, really, isn't it? The same as going after somebody like Carl Darlow and finding that Bournemouth are in the mix too and trying to stop you.
With Steinson in as well, it's interesting to see how that one unfolds because you've obviously got Nick Hammond there at the minute as well, handling transfers. And we've got a confirmed job title for Steinson now, haven't we?
Yes, technical director, which is different to director of football, although it does...
Is it not technical director and transfers?
Yes, it's a bit like the Judean People's Front, isn't it?
Yeah.
That all seems to lend itself to being the same thing in the same way as
that's the second Monty Python reference we've had on the shows this week.
Yeah, well, in the same way as when Farke came in and we were told he's manager, not head coach, and you thought to yourself, yeah, but it's semantics, really, isn't it? There's no difference. But actually, I think in his mind, in Farke's mind, there is a difference because in certain head coach models, you have a director of football who pretty much manages recruitment. In some cases, will decide which players you're taking, will hoist players onto you, will say, this is who we want to sign, you make it work. And there are head coaches who are happy with that. Farke was really clear when he came in that he definitely wanted a big say in transfers, and that he needed the final say when it came to who they were approaching, who they were actually going to take. And that basically he'd be able to build the squad in his own image. It would be his call. So I think it is relevant, the fact that he's asked for that and the fact that he is a manager by title as opposed to a head coach. Steinson, I think it's fair to say that Steinson will not have the same seniority that Orta did. Orta would sit in board meetings. Orta was always seen as on a par with somebody like Angus Kinnear, seen as more senior than the head coach in most instances. What you'll have now with the structure is Moratti obviously is chairman and other directors like Reid Klein-Thomas and Peter Lowy. Kinnear in the role of chief executive, but then below Kinnear you have this tier of management, answerable to him really in the way that he's answerable to Moratti, which will be Steinson and Nick Hammond, who's sticking around for now. And actually I think Leeds have been pretty impressed with some of the work he's done, might consider trying to keep him on longer beyond this. Also Farke, obviously. Adam Underwood, who's been academy manager since 2009, has moved into the job of head of football operations, which is a logistical position, really. Logistics.
Is that looking after Adam Forshaw?
No, that is the Rob Price role, who is head of medicine and performance. But football operations.
That was a really weak joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was. It was. He's going to come down and kill you, Forshaw, isn't it? It's player care. It's the logistics of making sure that departments run properly, that everybody's got what they need, that around about Farke's work. Everything is looked after, so no coaching, no analysis. That's not what it involves, but it is essentially logistical. And then you've got somebody like Hannah Cox, who looks after contracts and paperwork, makes sure Leeds are compliant with rules and everything else. Head of football administration, and then we mentioned Rob Price, who has been there for a long time and is head of the medical department. So you have that kind of tier that tier of management below Kinnear. And I think in terms of recruitment anyway, it probably creates a degree of separation from board level that wasn't necessarily there previously.
Interesting to say that Hammond might stay on then. So if you've got Steinson who's in charge of technical matters, but also transfers, then where would somebody else, another, fit in, whether it's Hammond or someone else?
Well, clubs are very active on recruitment front these days, so it's not as if you don't need several pairs of hands. Whether Hammond would want to stay, whether Leeds at the end of this window would want him to stay, we'll have to see. At the moment, they're just talking about the fact that he has this short-term contract that runs to the end of the window and they're expecting him to see it out. And the fact that Steinson has come in as technical director doesn't change the need for Hammond to be here as far as we can see.
There'd have to be a handover, wouldn't there, anyway?
Of course there would be, yeah. You
the
can
middle of the window.
Chuck your files onto Steinson's desk and say, look, mate, it's all there. You just have to flick through it. But also, I think the structure does leave the door open to the scope for Leeds to go back to a director of football model if, on reflection, they felt like they needed it. If they felt that in the end they did need somebody more senior or somebody who could have a bit more overarching authority, I guess at the sort of level that Kinnear is at, then they could do that. But for now, this seems to be the setup that they're going with.
So is that something like Director of Football Operations, maybe you call that, or whatever?
Possibly, yes. Invent your own title.
Steinson doesn't strike me as a man you'd want to argue with, judging by the profile of him on The Athletic.
No, I would say so, no. But it seems to be pretty well thought of in the game. Fairly highly rated. But
no question marks about the Everton spell? People pointing out that their recruitment's not exactly been dazzling, and they're in a great big financial hole at the minute. It's not been dazzling, except he wasn't the head of the department over there. He had brands above him in the same way that at Tottenham he wouldn't have classed him as number one when it came to the recruitment strategy and everything else. So, I mean, when I say he was really well thought of at Fleetwood, people will say to me, well, that was Fleetwood. But I think he's probably cut his teeth and earned his stripes to the level where he merits this job. And they did interview other candidates. They did speak to other people, and they clearly think that, firstly, he's right for the job, but secondly, he's right to come in now and make a difference. Because if you go back to the statement when Hammond was appointed, it did say quite clearly, we're in the market for a director of football, and we'd aim to make that appointment round about October in order for them to focus on the January window, whereas Nick Hammond will look after the business through the summer and up until the end of August. So that was very much in the thinking. But as it is at the moment, it's Steinson in as technical director. Be interesting to see if there's any, I say interesting to see, we won't never know, I guess, but whether behind the scenes there's been a little bit of skewing about targets, whether Steinson comes in with his own ideas at this point and where it leads us next. Well, I think not only Steinson, but I think you can safely assume that Farke will have come in with his own ideas and his own targets. And, he spoke to Ampadu before he signed. He was given the sign-off on that in the sense that it was a case of if Farke doesn't want him, you don't do it, but Farke did want him, so it was done. I think it's quite easy to get bogged down in the technicalities of who has what title, how it all fits together. The critical thing with this stuff is that the relationships work in a way which mean that they all function really well. They're all able to be effective. There's no kind of politics infecting what you're trying to do. But they've got a big job on this summer. They've had a big job on from the start of it. And, season's a couple of weeks away now from starting, and there's still plenty to do. Where do we go next, then? That is the big question, isn't it? Because the gloss of having got the takeover finished and Ampadu being confirmed will soon wear off, and people will always be clamouring for the next thing, because that's what football's like, isn't it? Yeah, you messaged me after the Ampadu signing and said it's all gone really quiet. I should say that was I think it was 3 minutes after. It was 7 minutes. Yeah, something like that. See, it's all too quiet now. Too quiet. That serious point about that, though, it's not actually unreasonable for people to be saying, okay, what's next? Because the season's coming down the line, and either of the interviews that Farke has done so far, the media that he did on the day that he was appointed, and also the post-match media that he did in Oslo, it was very apparent, and he's quite transparent in saying, there's so much to be done here. We have a hell of a lot of work to do, and it isn't ideal, it isn't perfect, and we need to get things in place. So people who are saying, okay, what comes after Ampadu are probably only echoing what he's saying behind the scenes. All the noises suggested that with Ampadu done, and from that signing, they would move on to a goalkeeper, which I think is a
pretty crucial position for them to sort out. They do like Darlow. They really like Darlow up at Newcastle. But the reports today that Bournemouth are starting to get close with Darlow as well. They have been keen on him for a while equally. And I was talking earlier about the life of a Premier League club. This is where you find out, isn't it, that you're trying to bid and compete with Bournemouth. They have the advantage of, I guess, not only Premier League money, they also have the advantage of, at the moment, having quite a tempting project with Areola there as head coach. So you find that you've got real competition.
Especially when it's like the chance to go sit on Bournemouth's bench more than likely, rather than be a Championship number one. It's fascinating, isn't it? Particularly the life of a reserve keeper.
Yeah, I mean, Darlow has done the Championship, hasn't he? Which is not to say that he wouldn't want to do it again. But as I say, there's something quite... Whether or not Areola works, and a lot of managerial coaching appointments in the Premier League don't work as they're supposed to. I think it is quite tempting. He's well thought of. He's an emerging coach. Very nearly came to Leeds. Leeds had a good go at him last season and did really good things with Vallecano in Spain. So you could see the appeal of that. I think when it's your club who are trying to sign somebody, and this applies to absolutely everybody, you want prospective or potential signings to see the best of the club in the way that you do, don't they? Don't you? Like, if I think back to Snodgrass when he went to Norwich, people would say to me, but if he stays at Leeds and gets us promoted, he'll be a legend at Leeds. And he'll forever be remembered for that. But sometimes it just comes down to clinical, professional decisions, yeah? That's what it is. So whereas you want your potential signings to see the bigger picture, or the bigger picture as you see it, sometimes they will just go for the money. They'll go because they like the projects that's been offered elsewhere. Who knows what Darlow is being offered by Bournemouth? Who knows what they're promising him? Who knows if he'll even go there? But it has to be said that this summer, people have been taking the money more than ever before, haven't they? It seems like a lot of transfer deals this summer are being driven by who's paying what.
Nubel is the name. Is he at Borussia Dortmund? And
he's at Bayern Munich.
Oh, right, okay. Well, he's in Germany, and there's rumours of a link to Stuttgart, maybe a loan. Leeds said to be in for him. Anything in that? 'Cause they've been really quite a tight ship, haven't they, actually?
Yeah, no, they have been. Again, not denying that he's somebody they've thought about. All the noises in Germany seem to be leaning towards him going to Stuttgart, but we'll see. They looked at James Trafford, but Burnley are paying big money for him. So that's taking him out of the equation. There are others they like, Freddie Woodman, Angus Gunn as well. They're going to have to land on somebody, and I think it's fair to assume that Farke is not going to want to go into the first game of the season not knowing who his first choice is going to be for the duration of it. Meslier is back. It'll be interesting to see whether Meslier plays against Monaco at the weekend friendly on Saturday, what his involvement is. But this summer's been a bit of a vote of no confidence in him, hasn't it? In the sense that Leeds seem to be of the mind that he could do with going elsewhere. I suspect he probably feels the same. But the fact that they are looking for a new goalkeeper is transmitting the message to him that we no longer have the faith in you that we did before. We no longer expect you to be first choice. So they will listen to offers for him, but as of the last time of asking, they haven't actually had any or nothing firm for Meslier. So how that's going to develop is hard to say, but what they can't afford to do is to end up with Meslier playing a handful of games, then suddenly a bid arrives that they want to take, and find themselves scrambling last minute to try and get a goalkeeper in. I think Farke will be of the mind that having your number one nailed down for August the 6th when Cardiff come would be a very, very good idea.
It feels like maybe we need a settled defence and backline, doesn't it, this time, I think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued by the situation around Meslier at the minute, because we are all talking like he's already been sold. And I do wonder what kind of market there is out there for him as a young keeper who has badly lost his way at the end of last season, got dropped, has been relegated over the last 2 seasons, has conceded an awful lot of goals, and who badly needs to regain his confidence. And you sort of think, for him on a personal level, it's a big risk going elsewhere and trying to rebuild your confidence and get back to your best form. And then, seeing Leeds links with Darlow, I mean, he played for Newcastle the other night and gave a goal away and didn't exactly look like the most comfortable goalkeeper with the ball at his feet, especially if that's what Farke's wanting his goalkeeper and his defence to do. And I do sort of think we have this potentially brilliant young goalkeeper. Would it not be easier to try and restore, on both sides, would it not be easier to get him back to confidence in Leeds. But I suppose, are they just wanting to sell him because they desperately need to sell?
I was going to say
someone.
Money, FFP.
The money makes a difference. I mean, he has no release clause, from what I'm told anyway, like Nonto. So you can, I was going to say you can name your price. Not really. I mean, in the Championship and after a couple of really difficult seasons for Meslier, you're probably looking for clubs actually to come to you rather than you saying, pay this and you're fine. It's not as if they can maximise his value in any way at the moment. I might have mentioned previously that one of the things that the 49ers were never that keen on with recruitment at Leeds was the way in which, from time to time, you would almost swerve away from what was the initial idea of what we need, what we want to sign, how much we want to pay, to something completely different owing to pressures of the market or whatever else. It's kind of not the way it's done in NFL, and clearly professional football is totally different to the NFL, and you can never get away from the fact that in football and in the transfer market, it is volatile, and you do have scenarios where, for example, you just need a centre forward. You need a centre forward, so you have to go for somebody, and perhaps if you can't get who you're thinking of taking previously, then you have to adapt. But I think what they wanted to get away from was, I guess, a lack of clarity in the thinking process behind what do we actually need and how much do we actually want to spend. And I guess with Meslier, if at this stage or in a few weeks' time you were reverting back to, actually you're going to play, you're going to be first choice, having given him the message all summer that you're probably going to go and we don't really mind if you do and we'll take the money for you. That's the same thing, isn't it? That's you kind of swerving between ideas. And I think at this stage they really do have to, and I think they will, but they really do have to go for a new keeper because they made it perfectly plain that that's what they want.
Yeah, you're right there about not having maybe a clear idea about what they want to do, because you think about the example of Cody Gakpo turning into Bamba Dieng, turning into Willie Nonto. Yeah. And just all the pieces ever shifting. I know it's a difficult dynamic.
I think more specifically as well, that week, the programme notes, without wanting to labour these, of saying we're pretty much okay up front between Rodrigo, Bamford and Gelhardt, to suddenly, we're not really, are we? And then you're chasing 2-3 different people at the back end of the window. I think that's the sort of thing they
for different reasons, though,
want to avoid. And with Meslier as well, you now run the risk that if you were to turn back to him and say, okay, we're going to give you a go, we're going to carry on with you as first choice, and then it doesn't work well or it doesn't look great or you start to doubt it again, then you really are going round in circles. And the fact that it's been kind of, it's kind of been laid out as one of the positions that they do want to recruit in tells you everything.
Into midfield, just returning to that point, and the fact that I suspect we need greater reinforcements in the middle of the park, particularly because Farke likes to do a lot of short passing, doesn't he? Interchangeable passing through the middle. So you need people who can do that. The lad at Sunderland, Edouard Michoud.
Was at Sunderland, yes. Was on loan
was at Sunderland. From PSG.
I don't know how much there is in that, but he has championship experience, clearly. Pretty talented player. The midfield's weird, isn't it? Because it's still not totally clear how that's going to figure out. They'd looked at re-signing Adam Forshaw on a deal that was reduced, was kind of reflecting his injury issues, but that hasn't been agreed yet or hasn't been signed yet. And people have seen the story in the Daily Mail earlier this week about Saudi interest in him, which is genuine. Other alternatives for him. Tyler Adams, there's still no kind of definitive answer on, is he staying, is he going? One of the things that will be interesting to find out from Farke at the weekend is where Adams is at in terms of fitness after his hamstring operation at the back end of last season, because clearly that is relevant too. But they are going to need the right players in there. My gut feeling is that Ampadu will play as a midfielder. Again, we need to ask Farke about this and see what he says. I think they see him as versatile, can do either job, as he has done in previous clubs. But I would have thought that will be one person for that area. JB seems to be pushing through. I think will be far more involved. But yeah, they need some bodies there.
What about left back? Just returning to the back line. Just occurred to me that we've seen no movement on that just yet either.
Yeah, they do like Charlie Taylor. Again, this is where we need to sort of quiz Farke a little bit, because Firpo is still in the building. Didn't play in Oslo because he had picked up a bit of a knock.
That comes as a surprise, Phil.
Picked up a bit of a knock. Yeah.
Can you detect the sarcasm in my voice?
Yeah, well, so slightly, yes. But where is Farke at with him? Because the thing for Farke now is that he will have obviously assessed the squad before he came in the way that coaches do. But he's now had the chance to actually see people in the flesh and to get to know them a bit, to kind of figure out their attitude, to work them out slightly. So how is he seeing that? I mean, I still think that they need to recruit in that area. Absolutely. I think somebody like Charlie Taylor would be pretty much bang on for taking the politics out of the equation.
Yeah, well, it just seems to me that if we are to get another keeper to kind of signal to Meslier that he's going to be replaced, it's probably time to move on. Could we do the same at left back? Bless Junior. I've got no axe to grind with Junior Firpo particularly. Seems like a nice guy, but I'm concerned about his footballing abilities. So I'd like to have somebody who's good at left back.
If you sign a good Championship standard or better left back, then where does Firpo fit? I think the answer is he doesn't.
In Spain.
Yeah. It's a great answer. Or Saudi Arabia.
yeah, could be.
Why not? Everybody else is going.
You can have him for 40 million euros.
But this is the thing, you see. I mean, you start to wonder actually how much money could you prize out of Saudi clubs. The only thing is they do, not totally true in all cases, but the big money seems to be going on players that are fairly recognisable, don't they? And I don't know whether Firpo really falls into that category.
I mean, you say that, they're going for the real glamour names of Joel Robles, who's playing in the Saudi second tier, now going for Adam Forshaw. I was making a joke in the Daily Email last night about who they're going to go for next, Vernon Anita, and then I Googled Vernon Anita, and it turns out he is actually playing in Saudi Arabia.
There you go. And Helder Costa was there before anyone else, you see, trailblazer.
Yeah, what about Helder Costa? Because he's been back. Surely he's not staying, is he? I wouldn't imagine.
Doesn't feel like it, no. The guidance at the start of the summer was that they would probably try and do another deal, or Mendes would try and do another deal for him in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, somewhere like that.
Yeah, when you've got George Mendes in your corner, you're probably going to be all right.
Okay, yeah, you probably are.
One way or another. 2 weeks to the big kickoff. It's not long, is it? Just a fraction over 2 weeks. You've seen the announcement this morning that reciprocal ticket prices have been agreed, which is
yes, I
better.
think that's a good idea.
And lower than I thought, because the rumour that was swirling was about 25, 24 quid. It's actually 21 quid for adults, which I think is very, very good indeed.
Well, I think that's very reasonable, isn't it? You at a price like that, you can kind of say, well, nicely done. That's making it accessible for people. There comes a lower limit where you can't really expect clubs to drop below. Particularly if at the same time you're kind of saying sign players, change the squad, this, that, and the other. There does have to be money flowing in, but no, it's for the best that, because some of the prices getting quoted, and it's like the price of tickets over in Oslo. It's absolutely ludicrous. Ludicrous.
We don't escape the fact that the tickets in the same stand for Leeds fans are 47 quid for adults.
Yes. It's
insane. There's no justification for it. I know Leeds United is not a charity, and we don't have the Premier League TV money. But some sense has to come into it, surely, and that just feels ridiculous.
It's a lot of cash. It definitely is.
That was my reaction to seeing the reciprocal pricing for the away fans. Like, that is very good. But what about the home fans getting swindled still?
Well, actually, the middle paragraph is a short statement on the website. Pleased to announce. Then the second paragraph is, the EFL allow reciprocal ticket offers to be agreed between clubs, and we will continue to work with all of the teams in the Sky Bet Championship to try and offer a better deal for travelling supporters. What about the home fans? What about the home fans in that stand, who are paying 47 quid for the equivalent seat a few blocks over?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's an issue. I think I would assume that there will be quite a number of reciprocal deals seen. Either that, or there will be a huge amount of complaining about prices. I noticed some grumbling from the Huddersfield end a couple of days ago, but there's no denying that that's a lot of cash for tickets. As I say, football is now, though, in this problem area of everybody wanting to see big investment in the team, but ideally wanting ticket prices to stay really low. I feel like in the Premier League, that's a fight that you should definitely have.
Yeah.
Because it's an active choice by Premier League clubs to basically spend everything that they've got when they already have massive income coming in. But down in the Championship, it becomes more questionable, doesn't it? Because basically everybody loses money in the Championship, and you only have to go back to Leeds' last accounts when they came up to see how much clubs do lose and can lose. It's a lot.
I worked out, based on the 3,000 capacity of the away end and 23 games, that if you capped it, it's great that it is 21 quid, I should say that, but if they capped it in the Premier League, like the same level of the Premier League, which is 30 quid, isn't it, for away fans, the most extra you could make for all those seats all season, assuming it was filled by adults and adults only, would be £1.17 million. So is that to be sniffed at, or
It's in footballing terms, it's not a lot of cash. That is
it's
it?
not, is it?
No.
It does make you wonder whether it's worth it for the.
I mean, it won't be long before somebody in Saudi is earning that a week.
Yeah, they probably are, aren't they?
Maybe already, yeah.
They probably are. You looking forward to the start of it all again, Rob? We were chatting to Moscow on the weekly show this week, and I think he wanted a bit more time off.
I don't know. I'm at that point.
Does more need to happen?
Yeah, but I'm at that point of pre-season now where I'm like, if I could just wake up and it's the Cardiff game, I'd take that, and we could just find out who's playing for Leeds. And almost the way Farke's talking about, well, we probably only know the team at the end of August. I'm like, right, if I could wake up now and it's September the 1st, that'd be great. I did see a tweet yesterday saying it'd be much easier for Fabrizio Romano if he just waited until September the 1st and saw who was playing for which teams, and it'd just save himself an awful lot of time. And that's kind of how I feel right now.
Yeah.
But that makes me quite sad hearing that, though, because that takes everything back to transfers, doesn't it? And there are a lot of games in August, and I'm looking forward to the competitive football getting going again, because however short the summer has been, as soon as you get into pre-season friendlies, you do just think to yourself, it'd be better off if this was just for real.
Yeah.
It really would. If I think back to other pre-seasons, going back 10, 15 years ago, at a time when it wasn't as if there were no tactics in the game, but coaches and teams weren't quite as tied to style and identity and philosophy as they were before, you did tend to get a lot of friendlies that were just kind of kickabouts, in the sense that there were loads of players out of possession, always loads of substitutions. It wasn't necessarily particularly structured. And that whole thing about getting minutes into your legs seemed to apply absolutely. Whereas with Farke in Oslo, you could see straight away some of what he was trying to do and some of how they were working tactically. And I think, I suspect at some point you're probably going to ask me, what do we expect of the Monaco game? I think we'll probably see much of the same from Leeds. It'll be passing out from the back. It'll be the same kind of 4-2-3-1 system, unless he really surprises us. And I think on that basis, we'll be able to kind of gauge how it's working in comparison to how it went in Oslo. I mean, you're not going to be able to draw definitive conclusions. But these friendlies are definitely worth watching.
Yeah, if Sam Greenwood's social media output is anything to go by, he's flogging them hard because they were all asleep on beanbags, weren't they?
Yeah.
Willie Nonto included, actually.
Yeah, well, I'm told that he is flogging them hard, except clubs never ever say to you, yes, just giving them loads of time off. Like, they're not really doing much, are they? And nobody wants to portray the image of a pre-season camp which is a complete doddle. But no, I don't think they're getting it easy.
Sam Greenwood's just cropped out all the bottles of lager that are just strewn around.
Absolutely hammered. Well, Rob's here today, and Rob's in his Castellon shirt, which
Indeed.
you acquired in Castellon when you went to see Pablo, and that neatly ties into the fact that Pablo has retired now, hasn't he? Bless him. I think probably, Rafinha aside, my favourite player of the modern era.
Oh, he's well above Rafinha for me.
I was going to say, Rafinha aside. Surprised you said
No,
that.
I'm not necessarily putting Rafinha at the top. I had to think about it in the car on the way here this morning. I thought,
Oh, it's totally legitimate to pick somebody else. I know.
Who do I love from the modern era? And I love Pablo, and I really liked Rafinha as well. And I didn't think to separate them and what separates them. I just thought those are the ones that have really captured my heart, if you like.
You can't knock success, can you? And I think Pablo, he just elevated himself by just doing what he did when he did it and when it was most needed. Whenever Leeds, for about 3-4 years maybe, he just carried Leeds in the moments when they really needed some inspiration. It was always him, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And I go back to when we did the Phil Hayes show, Phil, and we went up to Thorpe Arch and we spoke to Pablo, and just being in the same room.
He's a lovely fella,
yeah.
isn't he? He really is.
It was great, and very rarely get starstruck, but with Pablo, he's just got that. He's got an aura about him as Pablo. It's the magical aura. It's El Mago, isn't it? He when we spoke to him, he said, well, we asked him, how do you do what you do? Mm-hmm. How is it that you have that?
Particularly the passes that you shouldn't be able to see.
And nutmegging a mermaid from 30 yards and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of the Harrison goal, though. That ball from deep, and in a game that he did a really good job of settling Hernandez.
Which game was that, sorry?
I'm pretty sure this was during the COVID running. Leeds beat Fulham 3-0 at Ellen Road. Have I got that right? I think I have.
Yes, when he sort of chipped it over the
That's right.
defence,
So
yeah.
one of the goals in that was a blind pass to Harrison, who was running about 20, 30 yards in front of him. That high ball over the top, which seemed to be one of those that you could only do if you knew what you were doing. So therefore, when we went to see him at Thorpe Arch, the question was, how do you do it? And the answer seemed to be, Well, I just kind of do.
Yeah, well, it was. I see the
what
pitch.
geniuses tend to say.
He said, he said I can see the pitch ahead of time almost. He knows where everyone is. It's almost like a sixth sense.
Yeah, I'm doing him down there actually, because what he used to say was, or what he did say to us was that he used to just constantly scan and monitor the pitch. So he's always looking before the ball was coming to his feet. He was always looking at what was around him. So, further up the pitch, so he knew exactly what he could try to hit. Which wasn't to say that he was always going to be able to hit it. But that one stands out particularly as, you could actually do a great montage of Hernandez's ludicrously good passes. There's a fantastic one, I think against Burton Albion, where he plays a ball from the touchline in front of the dugout. He's basically on the halfway line. Through about 4 or 5 players into the run of Ducara, who, bless his cotton socks, looks like he's dragging a caravan at the speed he's going, but gets brought down and Leeds win a penalty. But there was absolutely loads of that, just ridiculously good balls, assists, whatever else, where you thought this is a quality player anyway, really classy player, but we're actually seeing the best of him. The best of his career were those 2 seasons, 18-19, 19-20, when I think either side of that, there were periods where it was more difficult for him. Certainly the initial spell under Gary Monk was hard for him to settle until he did. And then obviously the Premier League season after promotion was not a great one for him at all. He wasn't involved in much. Him and Bielsa had that to do during the Leicester game. But 18-19, 19-20, I said on Twitter, he's just a total force of nature. Everything he did was fantastic.
It's the pass at Stoke for me. That's the one. That's the moment. The one for Dallas to run onto.
Yeah.
It could have been measured with a slide rule in terms of its perfection. It's one of those goals that I every time I look at it, I watch it and I kind of ache for how good it is.
Yeah.
There was another one against in the Cardiff game, which the one where we went 3-0 up and blew it and drew 3-3. But I was sat up in the gods in the East Upper for that game, and I think it was the opening goal for Helder Costa where Leeds broke and Pablo got the ball on the right, and Helder Costa's the complete opposite side of the pitch. And because we were up in the gods, we almost had like a bird's eye view of the pitch. It was like
watching Sabutio.
It was like playing FIFA or something, and you sort of think, yeah, pass it there, he's in. But obviously he's in the chaos of a game. He's on the pitch level, he's on the opposite side of the pitch, but he just played it first time and Costa doesn't have to break stride. And it is that thing of...
That was phenomenal, that was.
How have you seen that? And, I can see it up here, but I can see the whole pitch.
Because I'm going to say, if you've ever been down at pitch level and watched a game from right at the very, very front, it's a completely different view. I often wonder,
massively.
I often wonder how coaches see what they see from down there, because I can just see a sea of bodies when I'm down there. Because I never like being that low down. I like being slightly higher back where I can sort of scan it, like you say, and watch it a bit like FIFA.
Well, certain FA Cup games, Accrington being one last season, because the press box tends to be quite small, you have to spill out of it. So we were virtually on the front row of the stand at Accrington, which means that, and you do have certain pitches as well which rise, they kind of slope down once you come up. Yeah. So you can find yourself at a really low level, and it is extremely difficult to see what's going on clearly. And it's also difficult to know when a ball is hit, particularly a long-range pass, at the moment it's hit. If you're high, say in the gantry, like Moscow at Ellen Road, you can tell straight away if a ball looks like a good one because you've got a full overview of everything. But down at that level, you really can't tell. So it used to fascinate me that Bielsa would watch on a stool, because what you're doing by doing that is taking yourself down even lower, and Villas Boas, when he was at Chelsea, used to do this thing where he watched the game crouching down, and he used to say, I see it better that way. I was never quite convinced whether that was just the massive bluff or what. But Bielsa seemed to be able to read the game despite not having that. He would never ever go to the director's box or go to the press box. Steve McLaren, when he was at Derby, used to always spend the first half sat up by us in the press box to see everything. And you're right, some of those... I guess some of those passes from Hernandez, and I remember the nutmeg he did against Charlton, which was from about 5-6 yards away. It's so far away that it should have been physically impossible for somebody in front of him not to have just put their feet together and blocked it. I guess you just have to trust your instinct, don't you? And trust that you can do it. But none of it was ever by chance. And I think when we spoke to him and he was talking about, looking at what's around him, always trying to have his head up and be aware of what his options are before the ball comes to his feet. When you went back and watched some of the goals, you really started to understand what he meant. The only thing is, I don't think you can try to teach that, but I think you're either good at it or you're not, aren't you? And there was just that feeling with him when we were chatting to him, of him saying, it's just something I'm able to do.
It's just there. It's that genius. It's that unknowable quality.
And he was never the sort who would say, and you guys are just mere mortals. But that's basically how it is. Yeah.
But never have I felt more like a mere mortal. But it actually gave me so much more respect for footballers to be able to do what it is that they do. Because it's easy to be a coach and a manager when you're sat in the stand, isn't it? And you see things from there, and you get annoyed at them for not executing this extremely hard technical skill perfectly
at incredible pace.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing when you sit pitch side, is you get a far better impression of how quickly the game's moving and how athletic footballers are. And you know in the way that you get frustrated towards the end of a game when a player looks like they're blown out and they've got nothing left. If you actually watch how hard 90 minutes of football is, you totally understand it. But I mean, his last season at Leeds was a really difficult one personally as well. He was saying that his wife was pregnant at the time and they were very concerned about whether they were going to lose the baby. She was back in Spain. He was in England. I think it was all quite tough. And although I think the return to Castellon was as much a result of how little he'd played and the fact that, in that little period, things between him and Bielsa hadn't been fantastic. I think personally it was a good move for him as well. And they were his club. They are his club.
Yeah, and you've seen it right through to the end with them, which is a nice way to bow out, isn't it? I was going to say, I think when it comes to Pablo's genius, I don't know if, much like the Bielsa era, I guess was he the symbol, the totem of that? I didn't appreciate it fully until we've now had a little bit of time and distance placed between us and it. Like, I think I appreciate Pablo more now because we had two absolute bin fires of seasons in the last 2 years.
I think I did. I think
it's sometimes hard to appreciate things in the moment. I
suspect that's probably more true of Clique for me than Hernandez. I mean, there are quite a lot of players who bounce out of the Bielsa era as being quite emblems of it. Hernandez definitely one. Clique is absolutely one as well. They're the two that really come to mind. But you could equally say the same of people like Ayling and others. But I think with Hernandez, I remember when we went to the Charlton game, because the title was won and we'd written about 1,000 pieces about promotion and Bielsa and everything else. The desk said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to do a piece on Hernandez because I have a sneaky feeling that we've absolutely seen the best of him, but I have a sneaky feeling that we might not see this from him again. Like, the Premier League's going to be difficult. He's starting to get on a little bit now. Will he play that much? Will he be as effective?" And I read that back, and it was kind of saying this has been amazing watching him. Like, it has been. You basically seeing somebody peak in front of your eyes, even though a few years earlier he'd been in the Middle East and to all intents and purposes looked like he was kind of wrapping up his career. And then lo and behold, Leeds do him for not an awful lot of money, and he is, I think, the absolute star of the Bielsa years.
Do you fully appreciate him and? Well, Kosh, because you made your trip to Castellon, which, by the way, is on a great Extra Ball episode for members, subscribers. Go find that, because you were just totally fangirling.
Yeah, you said about being starstruck. And it's weird because you do meet footballers and it's like, oh yeah, you're just like a guy, aren't you?
Yeah.
And he he's very unassuming. He just came out with his wash bag under his arm. But me and my friend Sam, who I went with, we were stood around waiting for him for about half hour. I felt sick. I was like, oh God, like, because I just adore him. He's my favourite ever footballer. But and then we got a photo with him, and he was so lovely. He just chatted with us for like 15, 20 minutes. And kept thanking us for coming. But yeah, we got a photo with him and I put my arm around him and I could feel my arm shaking. And he could definitely like recognise that as well, but he was just dead nice about it. But then I looked over to my friend Sam, who was taking the photo, and his hand was just like that with his phone. It was just pathetic. But and we and we really we walked out and we just like didn't even speak to each other for 10 minutes. We were just like awestruck. And then we both broke the silence by just sort of swooning. We just kind of went, oh. He was so nice. But that's because of the way it kind of ended for him for Leeds, that it was in lockdown and he didn't really get the proper farewell, and that last season was a bit disappointing for him. I just felt compelled. I was like, I have to see him play again. And when he announced that he retired the other day, like, I was genuinely sad, but also I was just so happy that I got to see him play one more time. And you could tell that physically he was slowing down and it wasn't the greatest standard, but there was a moment in the second half where he did, right in front of us, he puffed his cheeks out and nutmegged someone, and it was just like, that's been worth the whole trip. Like,
you can retire from being a football fan at the point.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's been terrible since then.
I really love how you describe it like that, because and that's what the point I was getting at about maybe the last couple of years placing him and the Bielsa era into context, because I can't say since Rafinha there's been anybody who's made me go like that, who would make me swoon and think there's something unknowable and genius-like about you.
The very salt of the earth, though, his because I went over and did a piece on Castellon shortly after we launched. I think it was 2019, and it was about the fact that Hernandez had been involved in and his dad had been involved in the takeover of the club. They were pretty much bankrupt and about to go out of business. And his parents live in a really nice but pretty modest three-story house just not far from the stadium. Hernandez lives locally. His wife, who is just sort of casually the sister of Sergio Garcia, same again. Like, there's no kind of celebrity edge with them at all. She once said to me, like, Hernandez is super, super proud of his roots in Castellon. It's the only place realistically that he would want to settle when he retires, and there was always a high chance that he would go back there because he does think a lot of the club. And you go, like Rob will know this, and the stadium is in no way the Etihad or the Emirates at all. It's really old. It's proper, like, classic lower league Spanish ground. They get a really good support, actually, to Castellon. But you got the sense of a club that was kind of being not run by mates, but it had a kind of, and this is a compliment, it had a kind of amateur feel to it in the way that everybody operated. But one of the staff members there was a friend of Hernandez's, and they were kids together growing up. They played at Castellon together when they were young, and he's long since retired. But he said to me this back in 2019. He said, I look at Hernandez playing for Leeds at the moment and what he's doing, and I just think you have to be joking. Like, how are you still able to do this, and why are you still so good? And a few people have said to me, yeah, but it was the Championship. And my attitude to that is just, who cares, really? It doesn't matter, does it? Like, seeing quality football and seeing quality moments is kind of irrespective of the level that it's at, and it doesn't have to be the World Cup final in order to be relevant. And I think that was really true of Hernandez.
That's very true of, I think, the season that's coming up, is that because I know that Farke likes to play decent football, that's maybe, I think, where my anticipation for the new season is coming, that finally we'll see a return to something like possession football, which just turned this crowd on so much, didn't it, when Bielsa was here? And it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but if we can see some nice football, some nice moments, some good moves that make you go, oh, that was lovely. That's all I really want more than anything. I hated the Premier League.
With Pablo, I
hated it so much that we're trying to get back there.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing, it's better than the alternative, isn't it? Because you can't be the relegated club with parachute payments and a bigger turnover forever. Eventually, you'll just regress to the mean.
I'm not convinced that Manchester City's treble last season will have generated more satisfaction for them than the 1920 season when Leeds went up. Or I guess you could say those two seasons back to back, 18-19, 19-20. I just think in the end, it's a case of what you're looking for, isn't it? And that doesn't necessarily have to be trophies, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the best of the best players. It's just something that feels good.
It's what Bielsa was always after. It was beauty, like that transcends the result.
And everybody's interpretation of beauty is totally different. Some people do base that purely on what you win.
Get it in fucking mixer.
Yeah, absolutely. Boom, Weston, throw this as far as you can. Yeah. But some people do base that on what's in your trophy cabinet, and that's fine. Like, that's totally fair way to look at football. But I guess if you follow Leeds, or if you go further down and you follow Hearts, as I do, you're not going to get many trophies, are you, in the grand scheme of things? And especially not now that you need mega money to win them. So you have to find your pleasure in other ways.
Yeah. Right, Monaco at the weekend. We don't need to say a great deal about that, more than we've already said. I think that it's a friendly. It'll be played out like a friendly.
Maybe.
There'll be a result. Some players will play. You off to that?
Yes.
On your doorstep, isn't it?
Yeah, up the road.
On your doorstep. Good. So should we have a chat on Monday about that and reflect on what
Absolutely,
it was like?
Yeah. It can be our first proper Monday club, 15 minutes, that is done on a Monday and it's done in 15 minutes.
And then you are pissing off for about 10 days.
Yes.
So there will be Monday's show where we'll reflect on Monaco. Then you're away the day after, back in time for Cardiff. We said we'll maybe try and sort out something that morning.
Yes, you know the drill. It'll all go off.
Of course it will. As soon as you go away, it does, doesn't it? Thanks for joining us.
I'm taking one for the team, basically. Yeah, I'm going on holiday, so things happen.
Work shy, that's the word I was after. Thanks for joining us for this one. We will be back on Monday. We'll see you soon.
The Square Ball Podcast.